So, yeah, Michael Smith. I actually live here in Japan, and I work for Keio University and the W3C. And you can email me at mike@w3.org. You can also follow me if you care to on Twitter at SideshowBarker. And also, I'm one of the people that blogs from HTML5. And also, in keeping with the theme today. So I only have 10 minutes, and I'm going to talk about something very specific, which is web components. And even if I were to talk about all of web components, we would be here all day because it's quite complex. So I'm going to pick one thing and try to tell you what is good about this one thing, and then you can go home afterwards and read on your own about the other stuff that's in web components. So what I'm going to talk about is the template element. And so template element is just part of a new feature that is not in all browsers yet that's called web components. And it's a proposal, but it actually has large parts of this are already implemented in Google Chrome. And I think you can expect that they're going to be implemented in other browsers too. There are some other proposed elements with names, creative names like content, decorator, and shadow. These are not part of the HTML spec, but they're in a separate spec, which eventually will get incorporated, merged into the HTML spec. And there's another feature of web components that even, in fact, allows you to define your own custom elements. So if you've ever wanted to have elements that aren't in the spec, you can just go crazy and start coming up with all kinds of new elements and giving them all kinds of crazy names. So what does template allow you to do? Well, it allows you to define and declare a fragment of a document. And you can do that already just by putting that into a document. But what's different about this is you put that template element into your document, and at the time when that document loads, none of the content that's in that template element is used. So basically, at that point, the template element is completely useless to you. But what happens in the browser is that the browser actually parses that document fragment, and it exposes it to JavaScript. So you can then do things with that template content using JavaScript. And so what you can do is reuse that. And so when you think about the name, that's where the name comes from. You have this fragment of document content that you can use as a template to create other stuff. And here's an example of template, and it's going to take me out of here to the screen, and hopefully this is going to load. And let me crank up the font here real quick. So what we can see here at the top is you have an element that's called template. You give it an ID, that gives it a unique identifier. And then you can see there's some content in here. This one is just a div with an image element, and significantly, this image element at this point is completely useless. It's not an image because it has no URI associated with it, so it's not doing anything. That's a clue to what template is about. Is you basically putting an empty placeholder in there for an image. And then you have some comment. You can put text into there, and you can see that's where you're defining the template element. So when this page loads in your browser, nothing is going to happen visually, and in terms of the browser behavior that your users are going to see. Initially, nothing's going to happen with that template element. What you have to do is start doing some things with script, and you can see that's what this script does. It's populating the content. I don't know exactly what it's doing here, but you can see it's giving an image URL to that image source attribute, so it's then going to become a real image. And you can then take that template and keep reusing it to keep doing things with that document fragment. So this is actually nothing really new. So a template, this template element, it's conceptually similar to, not exactly, but that's why I say similar, sort of, to an object that you use in object-oriented programming. What's different about this, though, So I can also say and point out that templating can be done with real objects using JavaScript. In fact, this is already done. There are lots of existing JavaScript templating libraries that you can do this stuff with. So why do you need the template element? The advantages of having an element to do this. First of all, you can also do templating of a kind on the server side, in PHP or Python or Node or whatever you're using, Ruby on Rails. The advantage of this is, again, that it's not a server-side thing. It's something that you can do on the client side, so it doesn't require you to do server-side programming in order to make it happen. The biggest advantage is that it's a standard, which is what we do at W3C, so that's what we like to promote. We don't promote JavaScript libraries. Well, we do, but we like to have standards so that we don't have to have libraries to do all this other stuff. And it's a proposed standard. It's not become published as a recommendation yet. It's also markup based, and in other terms I would normally call this declarative, except it's hard to translate declarative, so I didn't want to stick the translators with trying to distinguish between declarative and imperative. But JavaScript programming is an imperative programming language. HTML and CSS are actually programming languages too, but they are declarative programming languages. So this is a way that you can declare an element using markup, or you can declare a document fragment that you can reuse, but you declare it using markup instead of needing to declare it using JavaScript. And the other big point, of course, since it's standardized, is that this is going to be natively supported in browsers. So you don't have to import a library in order to do client-side templating anymore. You will just have your browser do all that hard work for you. So the performance is better, everything better. It's just, easier for you as a developer. If you really care to, you can go look at the HTML template spec, and it's a good spec, and it's a good read if you are one of those strange people that likes to read specs. But a better thing to read, let me say again and point out, template is just part of this overall feature, which is web components. Web components is really, really powerful. This feature by itself may not seem like much, or maybe it does to you seem like much, but overall, web components is going to change the way that you build web applications. I would go so far as to say it's going to change the platform itself as much as XHR, Ajax, changed the platform. Maybe that's overstating it, but it's for dramatic effect. If you really want to overstate it, I could say it's going to change the platform as much as CSS. The thing that you should walk away from and do, for sure, is read this specification, which is, it's not a specification, it's a intro doc called Intro to Web Components. This is written at a very high level, and it's really approachable, and it's really nice, and it was written by some people here, actually, well, one guy here in Japan on the Google team, Dominic Kuni. So please read that. Like I say, it's a must read. And that's what I have to say about HTML template for today. And I have 2 minutes left, and I'm going to use that 2 minutes to do some enlightened self-interest, which is talk about HTML validation. I actually work on a tool that you may have used before, which is the W3C Validator. So please use it, because they put a lot of time into it, and my boss likes for that time to pay off instead of people just not doing anything with it. And there's a couple features that I added lately that you might find interesting, and I'm going to show you a demo of those. But one is that the validator now can show you an outline that follows the outline algorithm that's in the HTML5 spec. And what this is useful for is if you are using a lot of headings and you want to make sure that the nesting of your headings is right and that you haven't done something wrong, you can generate an outline to do that. But an even more interesting feature is something that allows you to filter out the error messages that you see. And I'm going to show you a demo of these real quick. The outline feature is part of the production W3C validator, so you can use that today if you go to validator.w3.org or validator.w3.org/nu. But this is an unstable instance, and this also has the message filtering feature. So I'm going to show you something real quick. And let me just pick a URL at random here. don't know if you can see that URL.
Wow.
But, like I said, I'm just picking that at random. And so what you're going to see here first is I'll show you the message filtering feature. So what you can see is if you scroll down here, there's a bunch of warnings and errors about various things. There's actually not that much. I would expect that Nixie would produce a lot more errors, so. But let me show you the magic that we have added here. If you click this button that says message filtering, the first thing you can do is, if you don't like to see errors, just say hide all errors. If you don't like to see warnings, say hide all warnings. Info messages, and now your page validates. See? See what we're doing for you at W3C? So actually, seriously, that's probably not the way that you want to use this, and we would prefer that you don't use it that way. But what you can do at a more granular level is you can say show all errors, but you can then dig down here and you can say, okay, maybe you get tired of seeing attribute name not allowed, so you can just click that, and you won't see that. On this, not only on this page when you validate Nixie, but the next time you go to validate anything else, these preferences are stored persistently using local storage on the client side. So you will never see any error about attribute name being obsolete anymore at all, unless you go back and click it and go to show it again. And let's see, I doubt that this page is going to have any kind of useful outline, but just to show you how the outline works, show outline. And if you scroll past the up, either that didn't work or, well, let's try another spec here, or another URL. There's another one we'll pick at random. Ooh. All right, I'm in demo. The demo gods are not with me today. Let me try one more time. Okay, please say a prayer to the Kami-sama right now. And if they're kind, you will see an outline. Yay! So that's what the outline looks like. And you're clapping for me, but I'll tell you that I wrote some of the code for this, but in keeping with my goal of always trying to find somebody else to do my work for me, this code is mostly contributed. There's a guy named Keegan Street in Australia that wrote most of the code for the client-side message filtering. And there's another contributor that we had that worked on the outline code. So we have those contributors to thank, and also thank you for paying attention to this presentation and not booing and enjoying it.